Hello again, watch friends. Welcome back. I'd like to share with you my Grand Seiko SBGA085 Spring Drive watch. This is a very special watch, I think, mainly because it's a spring drive. And if you don't know about spring drive, I'll have more to explain how spring drive works in a little bit. But if you don't know about spring drive, it's really a technological tour de force. It's a hybrid between a mechanical watch and a quartz watch. So it's a very interesting kind of watch. This is the entry level, what I call the entry level spring drive watch. The list price is $3,600. And other than some of Grand Seiko's superior quartz models, this is the gateway into the Grand Seiko line. So it has a 9R65 movement, which is the spring drive. It's 39 millimeters in diameter. So it's not a big watch by any means. And as you can see, it's quite nice. Simple yet elegant. The thickness is 12.3 millimeters. So it's not a thick, chunky watch, but it's not a slim dress watch by any means. You can see here it's got the Grand Seiko signed crown. And the lug-to-lug distance, which is from this point to this point down here, is 46.5 millimeters. So between the short lug-to-lug distance and the fact that the lugs are curved, it fits really nice on the wrist. So whether you have a large wrist, mine happens to be 7.5 inches, or you have a small wrist, this piece is going to fit nicely on your wrist. Notice that it has a date complication at the 3 o'clock position. The date window has a frame around it. It also has, at the 8 o'clock position, a power reserve indicator. Right now it's pointing to about 3/4 of the way full. This movement has a 72-hour power reserve, so quite a long power reserve. The crown is a screw-down crown, and the feeling is it catches when you push it in and twist it. It catches the first time. A little difficult with my gloves on, and it's a very nicely sized crown, so it's easy to grasp, easy to turn. And of course, if you look closely on the power reserve indicator here, as I wind the watch, you can see the power reserve increase. It gets more of a wound up capacity. So it's an automatic watch, so wear it on your wrist, the rotor automatically winds the mainspring, or you can wind it manually if you like. This particular Grand Seiko has a dual curved sapphire crystal with AR coating, so it really does a nice job of minimizing reflections, except when there's direct light like you see right now. It also has 100-meter water resist, so that's about 300 feet, a little more than 300 feet, so no problem washing the dishes. You probably could shower with it, assuming the crown was screwed down. Maybe some light swimming. I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't risk any of my watches swimming, but you probably could do it with a 300-foot water resistant stainless steel case. The case back is a screw down case back with the Grand Seiko emblem. There you see the lion. The clasp is a 2-button clasp, very solid. You got the Grand Seiko logo on the back of the clasp. Squeeze the clasp, it opens right up. It's a machine clasp, not stamped, obviously. The bracelet is quite nice, very well finished, polished, as you can see. Extremely nice. Nice detail on the case. You can see that there's multiple angles here. You have where the crystal is, then the bezel, then the next layer. The actual lugs have more than one angle to them, and of course the bottom of the case. The SBGA085 has a real solid feel to it, and if I put it on a scale here, let me bring the scale out, you can see that it weighs just about, I need to zero it first, it weighs just about a little more than 5 ounces, and in comparison, I really, when this is on the wrist, it really doesn't feel all that heavy, but in comparison, here's a Rolex Explorer, current version. This weighs a little less than 5 ounces, 4.8 ounces. The Ganot Ocean Rover weighs a little bit more than the Grand Seiko, 5.1 ounces. And just by comparison, the Omega Speedmaster Reduced weighs about 4.5 ounces. So, not comparing these watches like for like, just wanted to give you an idea of the weight of the watch. So roughly about 5 ounces, but it doesn't feel heavy on the wrist. Notice that this is the older model. You have Seiko, the Seiko marquee at the top, Grand Seiko at the bottom. The newer model, which is SBGA085, as opposed to SBGA085, is identical to this watch, except that it says Grand Seiko at the top, and it costs $200 more, so it lists for $3,800. Also notice the second hand as it sweeps around. This is partly due to the, or mainly due, in fact, to the spring drive mechanism. And the way I feel about the Grand Seiko is that not since the Capulets and the Montagues has there been such a controversy about Grand Seiko watches. Some people feel, well, it's just a Seiko, just a gussied up Seiko, overpriced Seiko, whatever. Other people who have actually experienced the Grand Seiko models in hand, felt them, worn them, realize what the quality is in the watch. So, and finally, it's got that easily recognizable Grand Seiko grammar of design, where it's got both flat surfaces, sharp angles, where the light kind of plays off each other between light and shadow. It's just really an elegant watch. I'd like to briefly describe the spring drive mechanism in this Grand Seiko. So the spring drive generates its energy via mechanical means. It uses a traditional mainspring that is either wound by hand to power it or wearing it on the wrist. The rotor actually gives it power. But it uses an electronic regulator to control the timing and precision. And that's what's different about the spring drive. What's interesting is that the brand, Seiko as a brand, it's possible for them to be able to create a technological marvel, and I think it is a technological marvel, spring drive mechanism, because Seiko is uniquely in a position because they have both mechanical watchmaking and electronics expertise. Very few brands have both sides of that, the watchmaking and the electronics background. There's two key elements. There's the power source, and as I mentioned, it's powered by the traditional mainspring. Either it's wound up on the crown or on the wrist. The energy is transferred to the gears and they move the hands from the mainspring. And then the second key element is the time control system, and this consists of an integrated circuit, an electronic brake, and a quartz crystal. So those three pieces comprise what Seiko calls, or Grand Seiko now calls, the tri-synchro regulator. Sounds like a fancy term, but it's just really describing three types of energy to regulate the moving parts. There's the mechanical power from the mainspring, the electrical power from the quartz oscillator, which is really a reference signal, and then the electromagnetic power, which applies the brake via a rotor slash stator. And this regulates how the mainspring unwinds and how precise the movement of the second hand is. You can see that sweep, a continuous motion of the second hand, is due to this approach. So this particular watch, the SBGA085, has 200 components. There's apparently 80 lubrication points. They're all done by hand. And if you check out the video, I put a link in the description below. Just seeing them apply the lubrication, it's just amazing. The tolerances are to 1/100th of a millimeter, and the final adjustment of all the components are done by hand. So that's, in a nutshell, what the spring drive is. And the spring drive, just a footnote, the research was started in 1977, but it wasn't until 2007 that they were able to come out with their first spring drive model. So that's the Grand Seiko Spring Drive that's in the SBGA 085. What do I like? I love the beautiful finishing. I love the smooth gliding second hand, which is incredible. And I like the fact that it's understated luxury. That when this is on my wrist, most people, if they even notice that I'm wearing a watch, think it's just a Seiko. But those in the know realize what it is. What don't I like? Well, Grand Seiko's not getting its just recognition, I don't think. But perhaps that's now starting to change with the rebranding that happened this year in 2017. So the fact that Grand Seiko is now being marketed separately as a line, the fact that the watches now have Grand Seiko on the top line, so they're Grand Seiko watches, not Seiko watches with a little tiny Grand Seiko at the bottom. So they're getting more notice, and they're opening up more outlets where Grand Seikos can be seen and purchased. A few years ago, it was very difficult to buy a Grand Seiko. You had to go to Japan or know someone or deal with Japanese-only websites, whereas now there are Seiko boutiques all over the world, and many authorized dealers carry Grand Seiko as well. And the fact that it's now getting better to obtain, the difficulty in obtaining was one of my dislikes, but the fact that that's getting better ameliorates that problem. So, in summary, the first Grand Seiko, model 3180, was in 1960. It wasn't until 2007, I believe, that Grand Seiko actually became a reality. It took 20 years of development for the spring drive. But of course, like I said, Grand Seiko started way before. And the word Seiko actually means precision. And that's what I think this watch is. It exudes superior quality, and it's understated, unappreciated piece. So if you don't want to call attention to what's on your wrist, you might want to consider a Grand Seiko, whether this model or one of the other fine models. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.